In today's video, I'm going to talk about Kingston's latest high-end Gen 4 NVMe SSD, the Fury Renegade. It is pretty much their top-tier drive that is supposed to compete with the highest performing drives on the market, like the 990 Pro, the SN850X, and even Kingston's own KC3000, which is really interesting because on paper, the KC3000 and this Fury Renegade have the exact same parts, but the Renegade has been tweaked a bit to make it perform even better, which definitely explains why this was one of the most requested SSD reviews in the past couple of months. So let's begin. Even though this is a high-end drive, Kingston ships it in the same basic package they use for their budget NV2 drive. Now, less waste is definitely better, but I do prefer having a package that you can open without completely damaging it, because if you decide to do so, it might be harder to return it after it has been opened. You can get a version with or without a heatsink, and as you can see, I have the version without it that comes with a low-profile graphene heat spreader instead. It is available in capacities from 500 GB all the way up to 4 TB, and I really like that they included the 4 TB model as well. Lots of high-end SSDs just stop at 2 TB, which is really a shame. I do have the 2 TB version here, which is dual-sided, so do keep that in mind for specific use cases that require a single-sided SSD. That being said, Kingston does specify on their website that the 500 GB and 1 TB models are single-sided. If we look at the specs, we can see they use the Phison E18 controller, which is a pretty common controller in a lot of high-end drives, and that they're using a 3D TLC NAND memory, although they don't specify which one. This particular model seems to be using 176-layer Micron NAND, which is the same as I had on my KC3000, and that one is actually among the best options out there. The specs also don't mention a DRAM cache, but Renegade does come with a 2 GB DDR4 cache, just like the KC3000. But one thing that is different from the KC3000 is the endurance rating. While it seemingly uses the exact same parts, the Fury is supposed to be a bit more durable, as you can see by its higher total bytes written rating. Now, in my opinion, this is mostly a theoretical advantage because in reality, no one will hit that number before the 5-year-long warranty expires, so I wouldn't really put too much value into that. Also, any SSD can break anyways, so you should always have backups no matter what. But let's talk about performance and how it compares to the rest of the high-end drives I've tested so far. And as always, I'm going to begin with the PCMark 10 Quick Benchmark, which is just a collection of different little tests that are meant to simulate all those little light things we do with our PCs on a daily basis. So things like working with various documents or looking at photos, for example. And as I always say, this is a great benchmark for anyone that wants to add some extra storage to their system for these simple little tasks. And here, the Fury Renegade starts off pretty well. It is an objectively good result, and it is in line with some other Phison E18 based drives like the MP600 Pro LPX or other high-end alternatives like the SN850X. Also, it basically gave the same result as the Kingston KC3000. Now, the full PCMark 10 suite is a more intense test that is supposed to replicate a more serious and more consistent use of your system, and this is a great benchmark to look at if you're looking for a new main drive or if you need to run some applications that can be heavy on the SSD, like editing videos, for example. And here, it sits nicely in the top part of the graph, once again matching the KC3000 and nicely competing with the WD SN850X. It is a little bit behind the Samsung 990 Pro as well as the new Gen 5 Aorus 10000, but those drives cost a lot more. Looking at the latency result, you get the same picture. It is definitely one of the faster Gen 4 drives out there. Even though the PCMark consistency test is not really relevant for most of you, I do think it is interesting to see how a drive behaves under an extreme workload that lasts for hours and completely stresses the drive to its very limits. And surprisingly enough, the Fury Renegade pulls away from the KC3000 with a score of 673 megabytes per second average compared to the 343 on the KC3000. I even retested the KC3000 again to make sure I wasn't missing anything, but the results ended up exactly the same. Now, it is really hard to say what exactly is causing this difference, but considering they have the exact same controller, same NAND, and similar DRAM cache, it just feels like Kingston has improved the firmware for the Fury Renegade, but not for the KC3000. Either way, now it does compete well with the MP600 Pro XT and looks really good compared to other high-end drives like the SN850X or the P5 Plus. But let's look at gaming. Now, 3D Mark's storage benchmark is a bundle of tests that include a lot of gaming-related tasks like installing games, recording games, saving games, loading games, as well as moving game folders around. And here, it goes back to basically matching the KC3000 near the top of the graph, which is again completely fine. If I just look at the gaming results that I personally find more important, so loading games and installation and update times, it all looks pretty similar. It scored just under 90% of the performance of the fastest gaming drive I've tested so far, which is the SN850X. Now, I don't think that sequential read and write performance is that relevant, as it doesn't really represent a proper real-life use as well as the previous tests, but on the other hand, it is also interesting to see if a drive at least comes close to the speed they claim in their spec sheet. Now, in sequential writes, it scores just over 6,500 megabytes per second average, which puts it yet again at the top together with the KC3000 and a few other drives. And only the Gen 5 SSD is far ahead, as it isn't capped by the Gen 4 port. In sequential reads, it was just shy of 7,000 megabytes per second, which is also in line with other top-tier Gen 4 drives. That also means it is well above Sony's recommended spec for the PS5, which, together with the gaming benchmark, means I would definitely consider this drive for PlayStation 5 use. Thermals seem a bit better than on the KC3000. Even without a heatsink, but with a little bit of airflow, it was very hard to get it to overheat and to throttle. After a few hours of the heavy consistency test, it still stayed under 80 degrees Celsius on the sensor and around 71 degrees on the FLIR camera, which is a lot better than on most Gen 4 drives. I still do think it is wise to put it under a heatsink, especially if it's in a spot where it's not getting any air. As I said at the start, these drives can come with a heatsink as well, but if that costs a lot more than this non-heatsinked version, it is better to just put it under the heatsink of your motherboard or get a third-party model that will cost you around $10 on Amazon. Links are in the description of this video, as always. So overall, it does feel like a slightly improved KC3000. It's not actually faster in most regular use cases and is definitely not much better as some people claim, but it does come with noticeable changes that will allow it to handle those extremely heavy workloads and thermals much better. So in my opinion, it is definitely the better option between the two, assuming the price makes sense. If I look at the US prices, it only costs a few dollars more than the KC3000. If you're into those really heavy workloads, it would be a few dollars well spent, but for most regular users, I do think it's a little bit expensive. A 2TB Crucial P5 Plus will cost you $30 less, and it will get you most of the performance as well. Here in the Netherlands, the prices are a bit more favorable. It costs about the same as the P5 Plus while being faster, and it is a bit cheaper than the SN850X while generally performing at a similar level. The KC3000 is only slightly cheaper, but looking at these prices, the Fury Renegade does make a lot of sense. But as always, prices do vary all the time. They're different in different regions, and you might be able to dig out some nice discounts. So before you buy anything, always do your homework and check all the prices in your region before making a decision. Because if the price is right, this Fury Renegade is definitely a great drive to consider if you're after a high-end Gen 4 SSD. This video was brought to you by Corsair and their Elite LCD XT coolers. These premium all-in-one water coolers combine excellent performance with a fully customizable LCD screen that can showcase anything you have in mind. With a low noise pump and the AF Elite fans, they can easily keep up with the latest and hottest of processors out there while keeping your system quiet. You can install them on a variety of sockets, including the latest Intel and AMD ones, and once the installation is complete, you can use the iQ software to control the RGB effects or sync them with the rest of your Corsair gear. Check them out using the links in the description below. That is all I have for this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider pressing that subscribe button to never miss my future uploads. Bye guys, and see you in the next one.